The Lowdown, audio downloads for life. The Lowdown, a short history of the World Cup, written and presented by Mark Ryan.
Every 4 years, cities and villages all over the globe come to a standstill to watch the most passionate sporting spectacle on earth, football's World Cup. A TV audience of 260 million people watched the World Cup final between Italy and France in 2006. So many people watched the games in that tournament that the audience around the world came to a cumulative 5.9 billion in 54 countries, and 41% of those television viewers were women. Records will probably be smashed yet again at World Cup 2010 in South Africa. But how did this phenomenon begin, this tournament that captures our attention like no other? And what are the standout moments in its history? Before they invented the World Cup, they had to invent football itself, or soccer as it became known in some countries. The origins of the world's greatest game are to be found in England. A rough form of football was played in the early 19th century with huge numbers on each side. The rules of the game as we know it were more clearly defined by England's Football Association in 1863. The FA established itself through 5 meetings at a London pub called the Freemasons' Tavern. There was a big argument over a proposal that players should be banned from handling the ball, tripping and kicking one another in the shins. Those who wanted the game to stay primitive went off and formed the Rugby Football Union instead. For the rest, association football, or soccer, was up and running. But a global tournament wasn't even a distant dream back then. 58 years passed between the first football match between rival countries and the first World Cup. England played Scotland in 1872, but the World Cup era didn't dawn until 1930. So what kept them? FIFA, the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, first met in 1904 to discuss a world championship, and then they dithered for 26 years. You could see the problem for the game's world governing body. Before we could get to that first World Cup, football had to spread worldwide. As the 20th century began, British coaches took the game into Europe, where it soon thrived in places like Hungary and Holland, Yugoslavia and Germany. The British Empire was powerful back then and traded all over the world. Where the Brits went, football went too. Teams began to form in countries such as Argentina and neighbouring Uruguay. Styles varied. The British teams tended to base their game on long passes through the air towards the opposing goal. They relied a lot on the physical power of their players. The South Americans were often more skillful, and they soon learned to wrong-foot opponents with clever body swerves. They liked to keep the ball on the ground and show individual flair, but they could also pass the ball many times on their way to goal, as could the new teams on the European mainland. So which style and country was the best in the world? It was nearly time to find out. The most obvious place to hold an international tournament was the Olympic Games, but in the early 20th century, Olympic football tournaments mostly featured club sides and makeshift amateur teams. The First World War caused further delays in the creation of a truly international tournament. But in the 1920s, the South Americans came to the party. The Olympics of 1924 and 1928 saw Uruguay carry off the soccer title. And that signalled football's chance to go global at last. But 2 leading French football administrators, one called Jules Rimet and another, named Henri Delaunay, weren't satisfied with the idea of staying exclusively under the Olympic umbrella. Rimet was president of the French Federation and Delaunay was the secretary. They didn't see why the Olympics should steal all soccer's glory. Rimet and Delaunay wanted a tournament where professional players could take centre stage and break free from the restrictions of amateurism. At the Amsterdam Olympics in 1928, plans for the first World Cup were finally laid. The question was this: where should the inaugural tournament be held? Italy, Holland, Spain and Sweden all volunteered to play host. But Uruguay, believing they were now the true world leaders in the game, stole everyone's thunder. They offered to pay for any nations prepared to travel to Montevideo for the first World Cup. They even promised to build a new stadium, especially for the occasion, and celebrate 100 years of Uruguayan independence at the same time. And that's how the World Cup was born and first played at the Centenary Stadium in Montevideo in 1930.